Good evening, everyone. My name is Eric Eickhoff, and I have the pleasure of serving as the Director of Alumni Operations at John Carroll University. Thank you so much for joining us for the next installment of ACES, our Alumni Continuing Education series. ACES was established in the spring of 2013 by the Office of Alumni Relations in the spirit of lifelong learning. The program offers enrichment opportunities for our alumni, students, and friends through the expertise of the John Carroll University administration, faculty, and alumni community. Over the past year, we have heard from experts on ethics and leadership, the political and economic impact of COVID-19, racial equity and social justice, K-12 education, neurodevelopment, and communication and marketing, just to name a few. Tonight, we are focusing on current trends and topics in human resources and employment. The program is hosted by the John Carroll University Chicago Alumni Chapter in coordination with the Office of Alumni Relations. Before we start our program, I would like to take a moment to recognize the passing of Richard L. Murphy, a member of the JCU class of 1957, who passed away this weekend. Dick's legacy at John Carroll spans generations. He served as the Chicago Alumni Chapter president for a number of years and established one of John Carroll's most cherished traditions, the Chicago Chapter's Breakfast with Santa. Seeing that this program is hosted by the Chicago Chapter, I thought it was appropriate to honor him. He truly loved John Carroll, and we will miss him dearly. Please join me in a brief moment of silence. Thank you. Before I introduce our featured moderator, I want to share a few housekeeping items. First, we encourage you to view the program in full screen mode. Additionally, please ensure that you stay muted throughout the duration of the program. Following the discussion, we'll have an opportunity for questions and answers. Please utilize the chat feature for your questions. I will curate them and add them to the questions that you may have submitted during the registration process and send them to our moderator so she can ask them on your behalf. Thank you. It is now my honor to introduce our moderator for this evening, Dr. Rosanna Miguel. Rosanna Miguel, PhD, SPHR, is an associate professor in the Boller College of Business, where she teaches management and human resources. Rosanna's research in employee selection and adverse impact, public sector motivation, and management education has been published in the Journal of Business Psychology, Journal of Vocational Behavior, Journal of Management Education, Journal of Leadership Education, and Industrial Organizational Psychology, Perspectives on Science and Practice. Rosanna brings over 20 years of consulting experience in human resources and business psychology. Throughout her career, she has specialized in developing effective, legally defensible employee selection systems for a variety of organizations. In addition, Rosanna has designed assessment systems that provide developmental feedback to individual contributors and managers. She has assessed and coached executives and other leaders to improve relationship management and other competencies. Rosanna has a master's degree and PhD in industrial organizational psychology. Dr. Miguel, thank you so much for being with us tonight. We're so glad you could join us. The floor is yours.
Thank you, Eric. I'm happy to be here today and pleased to be introducing a number of experts all from John Carroll University. And I'll start with Joanna Crago. Joanna is a Pittsburgh native who graduated with an undergraduate degree in accounting from John Carroll University in 1996. She began a professional career in the audit department of Deloitte's Pittsburgh office, but spent most of her tenure there in the tax department, helping multinational corporate clients with income tax accounting and compliance. While there, Joanna earned her master's degree in taxation from Duquesne University. She is also a certified public accountant. In 2005, Joanna decided to make a career change and joined a spinoff company of Deloitte as the director of recruiting for its Pittsburgh office. She was responsible for sourcing, screening, interviewing, and hiring every consultant for the Pittsburgh market. Since then, she's helped hundreds of accounting and finance professionals further their careers. She continues her services as a director of Recruiting for Pinnacle Accounting and Finance, where she collaborates with the consulting team to attract and hire top talent and drive business development. The next panelist, Amy Marchland, is one of my former students. She is a Chicago-based Associate Vice President of Compensation at Revantage under the Blackstone Group. She has previously held consulting roles at Hay Group and Aon Hewitt, and worked in compensation at the University of Chicago Medical Center. Amy is a 2010 graduate receiving her Bachelor of Science in Business Administration, focusing on management, human resources, and psychology. She also received her Master of Science in Human Resource Management and MBA from Robert Morris University in Pittsburgh, as well as her Professional in Human Resource certification. Amy also serves as the Personnel Vice President of the Junior League of Chicago and is the president of the John Carroll Chicago Alumni Chapter. She also is the Chief People Officer and co-founder of Karma Score, a woman-owned startup that aims to help app users build healthier, stronger, and more engaging relationships. I'll now turn to George Sample. He's a Cleveland native who graduated from John Hay High School. George holds a bachelor's degree in computer science from 2002 and an MBA from 2012 from John Carroll University. George is Assistant Vice President of Diversity, Equity, Inclusion, and Opportunity for the Federal Reserve Bank of Cleveland. Prior to joining the bank, George served as the Director of Human Resources for the Cuyahoga County Public Library. Before that, George served in human resource manager roles at the Northeast Ohio Regional Sewer District and the Lubrizol Corporation. George is a president of the Cleveland Society for Human Resource Management, and he serves on the executive committees of the Board of Directors for John Carroll University and the United Way of Greater Cleveland. George previously served as president of the board for the United Black Fund of Greater Cleveland. George is a busy man. Next, I'd like to introduce Mike Winkler. Mike is a Pittsburgh native who graduated with an economics degree from John Carroll in 2009. He is currently a senior strategic people partner for Chime, one of the fastest growing financial technology companies in the US, recently valued at $25.5 billion, and the company's HR leader for their Chicago office. Mike began his HR career as a training and recruiting manager for Apple. While there, he earned his master in labor relations and human resources from Cleveland State University, and upon graduation, joined the HR team at Parker Hannifin in Chicago. Prior to Chime, Mike was the HR leader for Crate and Barrel's CB2 brand. He is a member of the Chicago Alumni Chapter Board and a mentor for undergraduate members of Sigma Phi Epsilon fraternity across the nation interested in careers in HR. Okay. Am I missing anyone? Nope. Okay. So let's go ahead and begin. The first question we have is, how do I leverage the JCU network for job opportunities, and what do I say to start the conversation? Which of my panelists would like to begin?
I can go ahead and take that one. Thank you so much, Dr. Miguel, for the introduction. I feel incredibly lucky to be with such a group of accomplished HR professionals. So I think we're in for a treat this evening. But in terms of how to best leverage the JCU network, as the Chicago Alumni Chapter President, I would be remiss if I did not first encourage you to attend alumni events. I think going out and meeting fellow alums from different generations of Blue Streaks and just establishing that personal connection is a great first step in the networking process. I know that Carroll alums are always willing to help and want to see one another succeed. So that's really a fun and easy way to keep engaged with JCU while also expanding your network. One thing that's always really resonated with me from my time at Carroll was the importance of networking and how you never really know who is going to present you with the next opportunity. I think another way to use your network is to think about organizations that you participated in undergrad. So I know I specifically participated in a sorority. I was involved in Alpha Kappa Psi, the business fraternity. And you can easily get involved in those chapters in many cities across the country with other alums. So not only could you interact with JCU alums, but also alums from other universities, which again can greatly expand your network with people you already have something in common with. One thing that I think alums often forget about is the JCU Career Center. So even though we've graduated, we can actually still use them as a resource in our job search throughout our lives. It's not just to get that first job straight out of Carroll. I'd also really recommend joining John Carroll groups on LinkedIn. I've had 4 jobs post-college, and 3 of the 4 I've actually gotten through LinkedIn. So I think it's very important to join groups that you're interested in there. Obviously join the JCU groups. And while again, not everyone's a JCU connection, it's a really great way to make business connections. I know that I've had several current students reach out to me over the last couple of years, and they're looking for career advice, job leads. So don't be shy, reach out to fellow alums. And if you feel more comfortable, you can reach out to Alumni Relations or Eric, and they can put you in touch with alums in your city who may be able to assist you in your job search. That's one thing I wish I had actually thought about doing when I was straight out of school that I did not do. I know I kind of just touched on being shy when, or not being shy when reaching out, and how Carroll alums are always willing to help. But I think one important thing to keep in mind too is just being genuine when you're networking. It's really important to establish real relationships and, not necessarily expect something in return straight off the bat. I've gone to many networking events and seen people who, kind of have the mindset of what's in it for me. And that's pretty easy to spot. And quite honestly, kind of turns me off a little bit. So I think it's important to just make these connections, make sure they're meaningful. And then, who knows, maybe there's not a job opening at someone's company now, but 6 months from now, they reach out and you're then top of mind and the prime candidate. So not sure if anyone else has something to add to that, but, networking is obviously exceedingly important, but really effective when done right.
Yeah, Amy brought up some really, really great points, especially that being genuine part. The thing I tell folks all the time is have a curiosity about the people that you're interacting with. You're reaching out to them because they are an expert in some field. They have demonstrated some way to go where you have not been. So when you're reaching out to them, say, hey, I'm a Blue Streak. I see you've done this, that, and this. You've worked on this project, or you've worked at this organization. You've had these successes. I'd love to understand more about your career path, how you had those types of successes career-wise, and just to learn from you. When you have that genuine curiosity, people like that because it taps in, it shows that you, number one, have done your research about them, and you're creating a solid case for why it makes sense for you two to be talking. And you have invested in wanting to have some curiosity about who they are. So once you do that, it's easy to reach out and say, hey, I want to connect with you for these reasons, to learn from what you've done and to kind of walk your path as well.
So far we've heard be genuine, be yourself, and show some true curiosity in other people, and they will see that and they will respect that. Mike, Joanna, would you like to add anything to that or give an example of an experience of your own?
I'd say, just echoing what they said, another fine point that Amy mentioned is getting out there and meeting people, especially now that, COVID is starting to wind down and getting back to the in-person meetings. It's nice to go to the alumni events in your city and meet the fellow alums. I made a lot of contacts there that I still, 10 years ago, and I'm still close with them today.
Thank you for that. Let's go on to our second question. When applying, what do I need to know about my LinkedIn profile, resume, and do I need a cover letter? Who would like to take that question?
I think that's me. I'm not sure if I'm freezing or not, but I'm just going to keep talking. Can everybody hear me okay?
We can.
Okay. So in terms of LinkedIn, you want to have a nice professional LinkedIn presence. You can even start in undergrad, getting that ready. You can put yourself out there as an undergraduate student or a graduate student of John Carroll and get that started, making connections with fellow other alumni from John Carroll, and then folks within whatever career path you're looking to do, right? So George is head of SHRM in Cleveland. Maybe you could reach out to the SHRM network in Cleveland and make connections there. So just from an overall standpoint of LinkedIn, you want to make sure you have a nice professional picture. It's not Instagram, it's not Facebook, so it just should be you and a classic outfit. You can even ask, get it done professionally and have a headshot done. That's always nice to do. And then the banner behind you, make that relevant to what you're looking to do. For example, if you were, an accounting major, maybe you could put a picture of, there's all kinds of backgrounds LinkedIn has to choose from, but it could be anything from textbooks to general ledger, things like that. Or if you're in a particular city, you might want to highlight the city that you're in, just so that it all looks very clean and finished. The other thing important to remember is that whatever you have on your LinkedIn profile, you want to make sure that whatever is on your resume matches. So somebody that's in hiring that looks at your resume is then going to look at your LinkedIn profile and make sure that, chronologically it all matches and there aren't things that are missing, or there's things that are in LinkedIn that aren't on your resume, and that just leads to lots of questions. So that's another important point. Yes, to cover letters. Cover letters are very important. You should always have a couple ready, and they should be tailored to whatever that particular job opening that you're going for is. So you're going to have to make that unique in every situation. And then it's just terms of your resume. First of all, if you do need resume help, you can always reach out to me because I look at resumes all day long. I have lots of tips and pointers. Just most important, you want to make it nice and clean and consistent. Make sure that, whatever font size you're using, that stays consistent across the whole thing. If you're using bullet points versus sentences, if you have periods at the end of the bullet points, but you don't have them on, just make sure if you go with periods, you stay with periods. If you go with that, you stay with it. If you're going to go for a chronological resume, make sure there aren't any gaps in employment. If there is a gap, then feel free to explain that. You might say, I was out of professional world for 3 years, raising a family, something like that, so that somebody that's looking at your resume understands the progression. What else? In terms of the trends these days, you should have a hyperlink on your resume to your LinkedIn profile. So somebody that's on it electronically can just double click. You don't need to have your address anymore. Just your name, email, phone number is enough these days. You might want to put the city that you're located. But now with this virtual world, you might not even need that anymore. So I don't know if you have any specific questions, feel free to raise your hand. I can certainly walk through a couple scenarios with you if you like.
Thank you, Julie. And what would you say about years on the resume? People in the past traditionally indicated the year they graduated, the years they worked at one organization or another. What do you recommend?
So if you've graduated, like I graduated from college in '96, I don't put my graduation year on my resume anymore. That's just just my personal preference. But I do have the years of my employment going back until like when I first started my career. Now, some people might be a little bit apprehensive about doing that if it gets pretty long. And certainly after a certain number of years, I'm okay when I see a resume and it just goes back 20 years, right? And then before that, it'll say prior professional experience at blah, 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 in the name of the company and whatever the whatever your role was. But that's up to you. You don't want your resume to be 5 pages long, but you want to be able to tell a story with it as well and not leave the person guessing as to what's going on.
Thank you. Mike, would you like to add some thoughts there?
Yeah, I think an important thing to keep in mind when it comes to your resume, also your LinkedIn profile, is how short on time recruiters are. The average recruiter spends 6 seconds looking at your resume before they decide if they want to keep reading or not. That's not a lot of time. So the important thing is, does your resume read and does your LinkedIn profile read to understand and show that recruiter, here's the types of industries I've been in, here are the key skills that I have, where that will pop and your recruiter will decide to keep reading your resume or not. And then same thing with LinkedIn and a lot of computer assisted recruiting right now, making sure, do I have all the correct words in my resume or in my LinkedIn profile that if somebody's running a search, they can easily find me because, if I'm a people partner, have I done succession planning, compensation planning? Those are types of keywords that a recruiter is going to search for in LinkedIn or in their applicant tracking system and would bring up your resume in that queue. So pretty much search engine optimizing yourself is, I guess, the headline there.
I'll add on to that.
Yeah.
If that's okay. I was going to say, whenever you are putting together your resume and you have your name at the top in the header or wherever, before you even launch into the chronological piece of your resume, you might want to put a section above that called selected professional accomplishments and have 3 or 4 bullet points there that speak directly to whatever opportunity is you're looking for, right? So whatever is in those selected professional accomplishments is going to change every time you apply to the different companies and different roles, but make sure that you can pick something out from your career that matches what they're looking for and have that at the very top, just like Mike said, because a lot of times the recruiter doesn't get past halfway down the first page.
Thank you. And a number of our students are engaging in experiential projects in the classroom, getting great experience that way. Would you recommend that sort of experience be incorporated into the resume or maybe left for the interview phase of an application? Amy,
I think if it's relevant to the position that you're looking for, definitely include that, especially if you're an undergrad, because a lot of times you don't have a lot of meat to your resume yet and you need to put something on there. So absolutely, if it speaks to what you're looking for and what you're going for, that should definitely be included.
Great.
Yeah, I totally agree with that too. And I actually have a question for Joanna. You had mentioned something about gaps in employment and being able to explain that. I'm just curious, with the pandemic, obviously there have been layoffs and people have gaps in employment because of that. But since we're seeing increased burnout, maybe people are taking a few months off. Do you have any recommendations there on how people would kind of explain that? Or I don't know if it's a little bit too early to tell.
No, I think it's okay to put, if you have, maybe a 6-month gap and you left a position in, I don't say March of 2020 when the pandemic started, say, you could put, time taken during pandemic to pursue other career opportunities or things like that, or consulting, independent consulting or something along those lines. It doesn't seem like you're just sitting there twiddling your thumbs.
Oh, the other thing I would toss in there is on your LinkedIn profile, make sure that your volunteer experiences are there as well. One of the key things about this process is having as many connection points as possible because we're humans. Every recruiter is a human. So if they come across your profile and you're interested in things that they're also interested in, that's just another way for you to show that you are a person who would be a cultural addition to whatever organization they're part of, and it makes you more interesting and appealing to them to move forward in their process.
Thank you, George. We'll move on to our next question. Mike, who or how should I best prepare for an interview? We'll ask Mike Winkler.
In terms of interview prep, when anybody asks me this question, I always tell them to think of the acronym STAR, and I'll explain what that means in a minute. Within the last 15 years or so, a lot of interview questions have gone from situational, which are just general, how would you handle this hypothetical situation type questions, to more behavioral based interview questions. So that's questions that kind of start with tell me about a time when. So looking for a specific situation and how you handled it. The theory behind that is that past results indicate future potential performance in a role. So a lot of people in the interview process are going to ask you these very specific behavioral based questions. And the way to answer those is to make sure you're covering what's called the STAR acronym. So starting out your answer with the situation or task, so that's the ST. So here is exactly the situation I was in or the task I was assigned. A is what are the actions that were taken in resolving this situation or this task, and what are the results or of those actions or the lesson learned in those. So when you approach thinking of how you can answer potential interview questions, that's the acronym that's really essential to remember when you're preparing for an interview. And then when it comes to question themes, a lot of questions kind of base themselves around a handful of common themes. So anticipating those themes and coming up with your answers is something that's really going to help build your confidence and prepare you very well for whatever interview you go into. So a lot of those are like working or achieving something on your own, or working and achieving something cross-functionally or with a team, resolving conflict, giving feedback, handling mistakes, or maybe receiving negative feedback. And a lot of times, generally, the questions will also tie back to the organization's core values. So it's really important that when you're doing your homework, which you should always do your homework when you're in the interview phase, that you're looking at what are the core values? Are they on their website? For a lot of organizations, they are, and anticipating questions that are tied back into those core values, because they want to make sure that whoever they're hiring is aligned to those values and can provide examples of how they've demonstrated those values in the past. So I would say preparing for themes and remembering that acronym will put you very far ahead in your prep for interviews.
Would you say that there are any new kind of questions or skills that will be tapped in the interviews post-COVID? I know some organizations may be looking for specific skills now that we've gone through that. So I'm curious if there may be something to look out for in the interview process.
Yeah, that's a good question, and nothing I can think of from the top of my head. I'm curious what the rest of the panel, if they've had any experience with like recent updates to interview questions based on recent events.
Yeah, the adaptability of people. So as the workplace continues to change, someone's showing their ability and desire to continually upgrade their skill set has been huge. And as we look at our workforce when bringing folks on, we're seeing how adaptable are they? How broad have they pushed their skill set? And what have they done to intentionally keep developing their skill set?
Thanks, George. Anyone else?
One of the things I would add from to build on what's the STAR technique, don't just do it. Have a friend actually videotape you while they're asking you the questions. So many of us, even though we've done Zoom, we haven't sat down and watched a video of ourselves. We don't know what our mannerisms are like. We don't know what we sound like. We are not thoughtful about what our pace is. And all of this, interviewing is a skill set. And with any skill set, you have to practice that skill set. So I would recommend have a friend ask you those behavioral based questions and have them video you as you answer them. And it's going to be a world. It is going to open up things to you that you have not seen before if you haven't seen yourself on video.
Another thing I would add is to make sure you have a set of questions that you're ready to pose to the interviewer yourself that also shows that you've done your due diligence and have researched the company and so ask specific questions about, maybe current events that are in the news, things like that. Not your standard, like, well, how many hours a day do people work and when do you start? You want it to be something more in depth than that.
Mhm.
I agree
Yeah.
with everything that's been said, just doing your research. But I think also another thing to keep in mind is just explaining how you'll add value to the organization. Maybe you have some insights into projects or initiatives that they're going to take on and, explain what exactly it is that you would do or how you feel this decision would impact this, and really just being invested in it and, showing how you can add value, I think is quite valuable.
A number of great pointers there for interviewing, and all of them are key to being successful.
Rosanna, can I add one more?
Yes, of course.
I would just say make sure that you follow up with whoever you interview with a short thank you note via email is fine.
That is something I've heard has been kind of decreasing, in terms of people reporting back or sending that personal card. I think that can be set you apart from other people as well, perhaps.
Absolutely.
So George, I'm going to ask you a question about negotiation. When should I negotiate? And if so, how do I do it? This can be tough for people.
Always be negotiating. I have a 12-year-old and 9-year-old daughter. I can't walk out my room without negotiation. So it's always negotiating. And sometimes it's not just about the dollars. If we're talking, just going to keep the example right here in the realm of career, there are so many other factors that come in to go beyond just the base salary that you need to be thoughtful about. So when you're coming into organizations, one of the first things you have to do is be prepared about what your value is for that specific kind of organization. For example, HR director, if you like Google salary for HR director, you'll get a range that goes somewhere from like 60,000 bucks to 300,000 bucks. So for you understanding what your worth is to the organization that you are going into, it's going to be a different thing for each organization you have. So being able to use sources like Glassdoor or Salary.com helps you to shrink down what that range might be, because many organizations, they're not posting ranges right now. So for you to be able to shrink down what that possible range might be, and then starting to be inquisitive with the organization in regards to what their ranges are, and asking questions over the course of the process, like, hey, what is the normal salary range for this position? Things of that nature. It's going to help you to get a better understanding of where you should be even thinking about that position and thinking about where you land in their possible salary ranges. As you start to have the conversations with organizations, get a bit of understanding of, who are the decision makers? How much input does the recruiter have into the process? As you go along, you're trying to make the best possible impression on everyone as part of the process. But if you have gotten to the part where you're at an offer, you have to reverse engineer how you have these conversations with each person who is part of the process, because they can be advocates for you as part of the process. Bring them in. Be like, hey, I want to make sure, I've enjoyed this process of getting to know your company better. I'm glad that you have pulled me into this part of the process where we're talking about an offer. Help me, be an advocate for me so we can make sure it's the best possible situation for everyone that's involved with us as well. You have to understand the picture in the mind of the recruiter. And I love what Joanne said earlier, and also what Mike said. Mike said the recruiter is looking at your resume for 6 seconds. You know why they're looking at your resume for 6 seconds? Because they have a lot of work they have to do. So if you look at your job offer from the perspective of the recruiter and also the company you're going to, by the time you're at the offer stage and you're starting to negotiate, they've already invested a lot in you. They've seen all the resumes. They've seen 100 resumes. They boiled that down to 10 phone screens. It was 3 interviews, and now you are the person. They are invested in bringing you into their organization. At this point, you want to make sure that you continue to explore what are the possible ways to make it the best fit for both you and for them. A lot of candidates feel like if they push back too hard, they'll lose that offer because there's a whole bunch of other candidates. But if they're at the point where they're giving you an offer, they're invested in moving forward with you. They would like for you to be that person. It's like when you go to the car lot and you find that car is the perfect car and you're like emotionally invested in it, things like that. So understand that you are a valuable commodity for them as much as they are for you. And look beyond just the base salary. You're talking about what things you want to negotiate on. Because there are some things that don't really cost people much, depending on the organization, don't really cost them much. For instance, many hiring managers have a budget they have to stay within. However, once they hit your salary number, how much PTO they give you is not really a big thing for them, depending on how they kind of do accounting. So they can give you an additional week of PTO without them being harmful to you. Or is flexibility important to you? Maybe the flexibility is important to you, but it's not important to the company you're talking to. Again, over the course of this process of connecting with the organization, you'll have a feel for if it's an in-person company or if it's not an in-person company. And then you'll know how much wiggle room there is to make sure the flexibility in the work arrangements are a good fit for what you want it to be for you going forth. And also make sure you're looking at that entire compensation package. You're looking at the medical benefits, how much you're paying for regards to medical benefits. Are there 401k matches? You have to look at the entire package and not just the salary number for you to know if you're getting a good deal as you're negotiating through things as well. That's a really quick, dirty going through. Go ahead.
I was going to say thank you, George, and that Amy, I know you have expertise in this area as well. What can you tell us about that kind of total rewards package and how to best negotiate?
Yeah, for sure. I mean, George did an awesome job. I agree with everything he said. Great considerations. Totally agree. As a comp person, you should always negotiate. With the reason being, it really can impact your lifelong earning potential. Even if it's just, $5,000, let's say that they offered you $100,000 and you can negotiate it up to $105,000. Keep in mind each year when you're getting merit increases, now that merit increase is on top of the 105 as opposed to 100. So over time, that'll keep growing and growing. And, it never hurts to ask. The worst a company can say is no. But if you never ask the question, then, it'll never happen. And I can say from experience, those who, ask the question a lot of times do get it. Or, if people question things, a lot of times hiring managers will go back and, give them that little bump within reason. So, whenever you're at the offer stage, make sure you have done your research. As George said, check on like a salary.com, a Glassdoor. Although as a comp person, I kind of cringe at that, but that's easily accessible to the majority of people. A lot of people don't have access to comp surveys necessarily. So you can check, based on title, you can check based on geographic location and kind of see the range that you should be in. And, again, like always just ask the question. Hiring managers kind of expect you to negotiate. HR expects it. This doesn't make us uncomfortable. So, it really shouldn't make you uncomfortable. One other thing to keep in mind is a lot of times when you're changing employers, that's really the point in time when you're going to see the largest increase in your pay. Certainly that happens with promotions, and I would hope companies stay with market, but the reality is a lot of times they don't have budget to do that. And so when you're making the move or you decide to make a move, I would say, try to have the increase be 20 to 30%. You know, that's when you're going to get the greatest bump. That's going to make your move worth it. Now, I know there's sometimes other reasons to take positions, and there's obviously exceptions to that, but generally speaking, you want to keep increasing your pay and, you know, not necessarily make it a lateral move, because that's really when you're going to see the biggest impact.
That's very helpful, Amy. And just one other question that I know students have asked and recent graduates is, some organizations ask what they made, what their salary was at their last job, in their last job. And they struggle with that, whether to indicate anything or struggle with what does that mean and how will that affect, you know, my salary going forward. Just any thoughts or comments on that?
So
Is that
that's
a question?
it's
Okay.
starting to become illegal. You know, so depending on, some cities are banning you being able to even ask that question, and a lot of it goes into some of the disparities that you'll see in pay based on a number of demographic factors, race and gender being a couple of those factors. They get propagated from one company to another company because the previous company was underpaying them. So now they go and take this amazing skill set to the next company, and then they're pegged to, you know, how they're being underpaid previously. And that happened that continues to happen even now. So it's, and realistically, compensation, you don't need the information from what the person currently makes. Compensation is based on the skill set that the person brings, and the intersection, the skill set the person brings, and the value of that position within your organization. So what the person previously made, it doesn't matter. You have folks who are later in their career who they've been an executive and they just want to stroll back into being an individual contributor. So you're not going to pay them executive money because that was the last job they were in. Same thing for the person who is younger in their career, who just explodes into the scene with this massive skill set. What they made while they were college or whatever, that's irrelevant to the skill set they bring based on the value of that role within your organization.
Thank you, George. Now we're going to switch gears a little bit, and I'm going to ask all of you the same question. It is, can you tell us how John Carroll contributed to your career trajectory? How has John Carroll contributed to your career trajectory? Who would like to begin?
I can
Mike?
jump in and start,
Okay, thank you.
because I've had this come up recently in terms of a question, and I think it's a couple different things. It's with the way John Carroll's designed with class sizes and how the curriculum is designed, learning to work on project teams and work with people maybe I don't see eye to eye with, or how to build and hold people accountable to projects and all of that teamwork has been really, really helpful to me, and something that we focus on very much at John Carroll. And then in terms of education as well, with things like the economics program, it really helped me as an HR person learn to think and look at opportunity cost and weigh out all factors before making a decision. Because when you're an HR professional, there is no very crystal clear answer all the time. So having John Carroll and my John Carroll education teach me how to really think critically through difficult decisions has been tremendously valuable to who I am as a person and as an HR practitioner today.
Thank you, Mike. Would anyone else like to respond?
I would say initially it opened a lot of doors for me just from the very beginning, just because of everybody knowing John Carroll as a name. And, you know, the recruiter at Deloitte in Pittsburgh recruited from John Carroll initially, so that door was already open for me. So just having that name behind me was extremely helpful. What else can I tell you? And then the alumni network as well, right? I mean, we touched upon that. It's going forward, people want to help like-minded people. So, you know, anytime I see a John Carroll graduate on LinkedIn, I immediately reach out to them, even if I don't know them, and connect. So,
okay. Anyone else?
Yeah, my comments are similar to both Mike and Joanna. For Mike's comments, it helped me understand how to think. I mean, My undergrad's computer science. I'm currently a human resources executive, so try to figure out that path. But also, kind of what Joanna said, JCU attracts a certain kind of person who cares about their community. You know, our tagline is, you know, men and women for others, and I've seen that level of service. And going through John Carroll twice, and undergrad was a party, grad school was a beating, but going through it twice, you get that sense of how service is important to you having a true impact on any organization that you're at. So I go into my interactions with the foundation of how can I serve those who are around me, and it's helped me to be tremendously successful just having that mindset with my interactions.
You know, we have the first question from the audience, so I think we'll go ahead and move on to that if that's okay. The question is an interesting one. How prevalent is the hybrid workplace for office-based employees? Do you expect this to be temporary or to continue post-COVID? That is a trend we've seen. How prevalent is it for office-based employees, and do you expect this to be temporary or to continue post-COVID?
Yeah, this is funny. I did a session 2 weeks ago talking about diversity recruiting. I started off with a Dilbert slideshow. It was like the boss was like, who wants to come back into the office? And people on the other line were like, kill me, no way, I'll quit, I'll die. And he was like, I knew I shouldn't let them taste freedom. So that's kind of where we are, where,
Yeah.
you know, for us, and I'll speak specifically about Federal Reserve Bank of Cleveland, we've been at home for the past 2 years. We're going back into a hybrid work model where most employees will be there 3 days a week. And this, depending on which department you're in, it might be less than that. I believe hybrid will be there for those companies where it makes sense. But again, we're more of a financial services organization, so it's a different feel as opposed to have some friends who are in manufacturing and they never went home. So it really is an industry by industry kind of organization by thing. But I think there will be more flexibility overall in the workplace than you've seen before.
Thank you. Thank you. Another question, thinking about the organization side of HR, can you give your thoughts on HR systems and how to utilize technology and analytics? HR systems and how to utilize technology and analytics. Who's up for this one? Joanna?
Yeah, I would just go back to, I forget who mentioned that. It might have been Mike about having those keywords and gaming the system a little bit there. You know, if you want your resume to initially be picked up by an employer, you've got to make sure you have those keywords on there that are going to be a match. But I will say beyond that, that's sometimes not even going to get your foot in the door anyway, because it's really about who you know in terms of getting a position. So you want to make most of your time is spent on building connections with people and not just dumping your resume into a black hole electronically. Even though you have to play that game, you kind of have to do both and spend more of your time building the connections.
Thank you, Joanna. Any other comments on that question?
I was kind of thinking of it in a slightly different sense, more in terms of like reporting. And I think a lot of people sometimes think of HR as being, you know, soft skills. But I mean, really, there's a lot of quantitative data that you can be collecting. And I've been seeing, you know, across our portfolio companies, you know, we've been hiring tons of data and analytics professionals just to be able to track various things. I know it's included in our metrics in many instances, which in turn, you know, impacts our bonus pools, which again, you know, I'm kind of talking from a comp perspective here, but, you know, it seems like it's a soft skill, but there's a lot of metrics we're actually tracking. And I'm just thinking too, in terms of like turnover, those sorts of things, you know, all of that's tracked, or it should be tracked.
Thank you.
And I'll chime in here as well. With HR, we've kind of gone into this strategic space as a function. And a lot of the programs that we try or that we do implement in our organizations, we need to show that they drove a result and they drove a value. So one of the things we really focus on in terms of our analytics is saying, okay, when we implement a program, recently an example would be we implemented a leadership training program, and we were able to control in the data and run analytics and say, okay, how do we know this was effective? And we were actually able to find that leaders who went through this leadership kind of curriculum had engagement scores 7 points higher than the rest of the organization. So those are the types of things we're trying to figure out in HR and as HR practitioners, is like, what is the return on investment for the programs that we want to implement in the business? And how are we driving business outcomes with the things we are trying to do as HR practitioners?
Thank you. This next question is an exciting one. Where do you think HR will go in the next 3 to 5 years? What are the most pressing issues that will impact the workforce moving forward? I say exciting because there are opportunities out there. And so what are the most pressing issues that will impact the workforce going forward?
Well, one of the things, you'll see the name shift. For instance, our HR department is called People and Culture. So there is much more of a focus shifting towards engagement, mental well-being, employee overall health. That is going to be very much a focus going forward.
So people-centric kinds of terms. Amy?
Yeah, I completely agree with what George said. We're the same situation. We've renamed HR to People and Culture. We're putting a much greater emphasis on well-being, trying to have a greater work-life balance, if that's even possible. I can speak from the comp world. What's very interesting for us right now is the fact that so many people during the pandemic have relocated, and we're trying to figure out how do we want to pay people now, right? So someone who was in, maybe New York City or San Francisco is now in like middle of nowhere, Idaho, but they're getting their New York salary. So like kind of dealing with those sorts of situations and, accounting for that is going to be really interesting how it plays out.
Thank you. Mike?
I would say +1 to what Amy and George said. It's interesting that, really mental health and wellness were really not topics like HR covered or really talked about even 3 years ago. And now that is something that is a major focus with figuring out what type of wellness programs we can implement for our teams. So I think you're seeing that. I don't see the war for talent changing anytime soon. So I think you're also going to see a greater emphasis and a greater focus on employee experience, employer brand. So what is the employer value proposition out there for wanting to join an organization, and how do you stand out from others? And having practitioners who are really focused on driving that message through social media, through LinkedIn, through Glassdoor, is something that I think we're definitely going to see. It's happening now, and I think it's going to continue to be more prevalent and more important in the future.
That's some great answers there. We have our last question. It is, seeing that an incredibly high number of individuals have left their positions during the last 2 years, what do you all see organizations doing to retain talent, which is another pressing issue facing HR, retention of talent?
So we're doing stay interviews. We're doing upward feedback, which is basically people get to kind of interview their manager. For certain folks, we're just throwing bags of money at them. It's kind of all over the place. It's tough right now. It is tough.
Joanna, do you have any thoughts on that?
I will say it is sort of like the wild, wild west right now, because people are leaving and they're going to other positions and just demanding loads of money for specific things that, 2 years ago they never would have got, but they're getting it because companies need the people right now. The other thing I was on what you said in the last question is what's new and exciting. I kind of am a little bit different than the rest of the panelists, and that I hire folks to be employees of our company, but then they go out and they work with our clients one-on-one. And so they're our employee, but they're working on an interim and project basis at these various clients. And I see that as a big, I mean, it was big before, but I think it's going to be an even bigger wave of the future, because we pay them a competitive hourly rate. They get time and a half for overtime, and they typically don't work the crazy hours you find in corporate America. So even if they do work 5 hours of overtime, they're getting that at time and a half, and they can raise their hand and get flexibility with their career. You know, they might work one project and then, you know, take a month off and then get reassigned somewhere else. And they like that variety, and they like the chance to build their skill set quickly from company to company. So I do see that as a trend of the future as well.
Thank you, Joanna. I think we're just about out of time, and so I'm going to turn it over to Eric.
Joanna, Amy, George, Mike, and Dr. Miguel, thank you again so much for joining us this evening. I thought it was a great conversation, and I think those who are on our call this evening and those we'll share it with will learn a lot from you all and your expertise. We are fortunate to have you with us tonight, but we are even more fortunate to have you within our JCU community, either as a professor or as an alum. So thank you all again. Before we conclude, I'd like to ask you to mark your calendars for April 19th and April 20th, as John Carroll celebrates its Founders Day and hosts its 4th annual Day of Giving. These programs bring members of our community together to celebrate all that makes John Carroll special and ensure that future generations have an impactful Carroll experience in the Jesuit tradition. You can find out more information and register for all of our upcoming programs, including our Alumni Author Series, Scholarly Luncheons, Alumni Continuing Education Series, and our Alumni Spotlight Series at jcu.edu/alumni. Additionally, we invite you to view recordings of all our previous programs on the John Carroll University Alumni Association YouTube channel. To view our extensive library, search for John Carroll University on YouTube. Finally, please consider a charitable gift to John Carroll in support of our students, our standing faculty, and our entire campus community. If you've already made a gift this year, thank you for your generosity. If you have not, please join me in supporting John Carroll so that we can continue to deliver an outstanding education for our current and future Blue Streaks. You can make a donation by visiting jcu.edu/give. Thank you again for joining us tonight. Take care, be well, stay safe, and onward on John Carroll.